Hello friends, and welcome to today's video where we continue our conversation on calling. Today specifically we want to talk about the process between the identification of your calling and the living in your calling. If you remember, we talked about three general kinds of calling, and then one specific calling. Of course, you start walking in the reality of the first three as soon as you receive that call, but specifically the call to a particular kind of work, which is what we have been focusing on based on Jeremiah 1:5, where the Lord was talking to Jeremiah and said, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you and I set you apart to be a prophet." And so, is there such a thing as the Lord calling us today to specific things? We answered yes. And today we want to talk about what then is the process of growing into the full manifestation of the calling that you have received. Before we do that, however, it is important that we talk about human ambition. There is such a thing as human ambition, which is not always a divine call. While there may be nothing wrong with desiring certain things as an individual and being ambitious, it's important for us to understand that even our most sanctified ambition as human beings always falls short of God's calling for our life. Therefore, we must beware of walking in ambition and not in calling. Calling is so crucial to the life of the Christian leader that we must intentionally, just like we intentionally pursue union with Christ, we must intentionally pursue our calling. We must guard against a kind of blind and immature zeal, the kind of zeal of an enthusiast or the zealot. A zealot is somebody who is so lost in his pursuit of a particular cause that they are unable to find themselves again. I am sure that we have experienced what that might be. For instance, somebody gives themselves so much to a cause that there is no you without that cause. With the crisis that's happening in our nation right now, you've probably seen videos that present very clearly what I mean when we talk about human ambition. It is something that we must be aware of as leaders in order to not end up being trapped in a frantic compensation or pursuit of what we think we are lacking. For example, you look around you and you see, oh, everybody is doing this, and so you put yourself in some pursuit of significance or wealth or whatever because you want to prove to another person that you too can. That is not of God. Calling as a Christian leader, it comes from God. It must be birthed in Christ, purified in community, and built upon fire-tested character. It is the purification and fire testing that is in effect happening in the process. In order to help us understand this process of calling very, very clearly, we are going to look at three biblical examples. We will look at the life of Joseph, we will look at the life of Moses, and we will look at the life of David. We are not going to be looking at these specifically, however. We will be drawing principles and lessons from their lives as far as the processes through which they each went in order to fully walk into their calling. If you remember Joseph, he was probably 14, 15 years old when he knew he had those dreams which suggested you are a ruler. This is what you are going to do. We also know about Moses. Moses was 40 years old, maybe younger actually, when he knew, I need to bring deliverance to the children of Israel. We know about David, who was 17 years old when he was anointed by Samuel to be the next king of Israel. But we also, if you are the Bible student that I know you are, then you know how much time went by before each of these people fully ascended into their calling. And there are some lessons that you and I can learn in this whole process. The first thing that we must say, therefore, is there is not only a what to your calling, there is a when. Okay, so when Moses woke up, remember when he woke up in Exodus chapter 2 and he saw an Egyptian and an Israelite fighting, what did he do? He went, he killed the Egyptian and he buried him in the sand. That in his mind was a manifest. Of course, he was the deliverer. That's what deliverers do, right? They save the vulnerable from the hands of the oppressor. That's what Moses did. And then the following day, the Bible records that he saw 2 Israelites fighting. These are now his kinsmen, and he's trying to make peace amongst them. And of course, we remember what they said. Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you did the Egyptian? Moses realized that his act wasn't so secret after all. What do we learn from there? We learn that while God might clarify your call to keep you focused and to keep the passion burning and to keep you growing and seeking to walk towards it, if we attempt to manifest the call too soon, we might get it wrong. That's what happened with Moses. God literally had to remove Moses from Egypt and drop him in the wilderness. Imagine that for a minute. He grew up inside the palace. He had attendants, he had cooks, he had people who served him. But Moses had to leave and go into the wilderness, and he spent 40 long years in the wilderness in order to be ready to come back and to do it God's way. And so that tells us that while calling contains a what, it also contains a when. And between when we find out the what and when we walk in the reality of that calling is the process of God transforming us, is the process of God purifying us, is the process of God pruning us. Character is what sustains us in the places of leadership. That's what was happening when Joseph was going through all that he went through. If you follow his story, from being thrown into a pit, to being sold into slavery, to being accused in Potiphar's house, to being imprisoned, and for waiting years and years until the day of his enthronement finally came. Same thing with David, whose life was being sought after by Saul. For nothing, literally, just for the very fact that he was appointed and called of God. And therefore, dear leader, as you listen to us today, our encouragement with you would be, if you find the what of your calling, that's not enough. You know, the mistake that many young leaders make today is they want to go from what to fulfillment. Like, you have a vision today and tomorrow you want to walk in it. It doesn't happen like that. God takes the time to prepare us, to give us the kind of character that will sustain us when he brings us to that platform for which he is preparing us to serve and to join him and participate in his kingdom here on earth. We could go on and on talking more and more about this, but there is no better and no easier way to do so than to discuss a life example, to talk about the calling of one of us whom you know very well. Ralph is going to be joining me, and we shall talk about his call to full-time ministry, which, by the way, as we get ready to talk about that, there is this misconception that if you are not in ministry, you are not called by God. But we want to say that calling is calling. Some people are called to be bankers, some are called to be pastors, some are called to be teachers, some are called to be doctors, some are called to be, you name it. And so if you're a child of God and he has led you to a particular profession, you are called to that profession. Let's now join Ralph, or listen to Ralph share with us more about his calling. Hi Ralph, welcome to this conversation on calling.
Thank you.
I know that you are somebody who has both received a call to ministry and has functioned in that call for a while now. Tell us a little bit, at what point in your life did it become clear to you that God was calling you to a particular kind of work?
Well, when I was young, early, maybe I think that was 2000, my mother had already started speaking with me that she wanted me to go to the seminary. Mm-hmm. But to me, seminary was not my thing. And at that time, I had not surrendered my life to Jesus. So I went to the university. While studying, that's when I came to know the Lord. And I felt in my heart that I had to get involved. But for me, full-time ministry, as they call it, that getting into pastoral ministry, it was not my thing. So in my mind was that let me complete my studies and become a medical doctor. While serving as a medical doctor, I'll be able to reach out to many people. Mm-hmm. So that's the time that I realized that God is laying this body in my heart to get involved in ministry. Mm-hmm. But for me, at that time, it was more doing medicine serving the people and then bringing the gospel to them. But later on in the year, I was convicted. In fact, there were many things that happened around. One of the things was that I lost my mom. The second thing was that I was asking myself, what is the best thing that I can invest my time or my life to? Is it becoming a medical doctor or just focusing on doing ministry? Ministry now, like the full time that many people talk about that.
Yeah.
So I was convinced that God wanted me to just go out there and share the gospel with people. And that is how I got involved with ministry.
Okay. How was that process for you though? I mean, when you say you were convinced and then you just did it, it sounds as if it was very easy. You just went, okay, medical doctor, I'm not going to be this, I'm just going to go. Were there any specific challenges that you experienced after you received your...
There were lots of challenges, lots of challenges. The first challenge that I had was that when I announced it to my brothers, one told me that many people who have walked this path, they ended up getting mad, insane, and walked the street. Wow. So I was very afraid. I remember I had to meet one of our Christian leaders at that time and asking him, how can you know clearly that God is speaking to you? And he gave me a very big book because there I wanted to make sure that what I am sensing is coming from the Lord and it's not coming from me. Or the benefits that the ministry that was getting involved, I saw people and I saw many of them, they were living well. So I wanted to make sure that it was not those things that I'm looking for, but really I wanted to follow God. So after reading that book and then asking questions from some other people who were involved, I felt that conviction that no, I can go ahead.
So you touched on something which we talked about in our last video, how you can discern that call. You sensed it, you consulted with people, and you got confirmations about that. Very, very important. Now, I am assuming that you didn't just wake up the next day after getting this confirmation and then started doing ministry like you had hoped. What was the process that you went through to finally start serving full time?
One of the things that I did was that since I was just coming out of the university, I said, okay, I want to give 1 year to volunteer because it was very difficult for me. I started the process of preparing my papers to go to Bush. So I decided, okay, let me give 1 year. I think maybe during 1 year, I'll be able to discern clearly whether this is what I want to get involved, because that was not the only ministry that I could serve.
Yeah.
So I gave 1 year for voluntary service. That was in 2003, 2004. I had to spend time sharing the gospel with students on campus, going for some short-term missionary trips. And at the end of the year, I was still convinced. In fact, the burden was now more heavy in my heart. Yeah.
And then what? And then you went into full-time ministry. Was there any kind of training or preparation that you had to do?
Yes, there was. After that, I had to go in for a 9 months training, 9 months rigorous training. I had to literally cut off from the world and go to a training center where I was living and studying. There we also had a lot of practical training and also teachings in the classroom that exposed us to many things. Even while we were in the training center, they had things to even still check whether truly we were called or not. And I was very surprised. But to me, it was a good process that as you go along, you can confirm that truly what you are sensing is what God is calling you to serve.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your process with us. We live in a world, our reality in Cameroon these days is people get a call tomorrow, especially those who start churches. We see churches shooting up here and there and all of that. And I think that for you, our participants, as you listen to us, we all are at different phases in our call, in our walk with God regarding our calling. For some people may still be trying to figure it out. Some may have figured it out and they are seeking confirmation like you did. Some may have found a confirmation and they are submitting to the process to become what they should be, and then eventually others may already be walking in that. But one thing we must underline as we wrap up today is this: there is a what, like we already said. There is a when, which is when do you effectively begin doing this thing that you sense God is calling you to. There is a where. where would you serve? And I think that those things, the where especially, might vary over the course of our lifetimes and over the course of different seasons in our ministry. And then finally there is a how. How exactly does God want us to go about this? Ralph shared about how he first of all thought, okay, I'll just go ahead, be a medical doctor, and then I can still be serving God like this. How is God calling you to serve him? What exactly do you need to do as you respond to the call of God? As we wrap up, we want to encourage you to see this. Submitting to the process is as important as identifying the calling, because it is in the process that we learn to submit to the authority that the Lord has put over our lives. And as we continually submit to that authority, our community then commissions us to that calling. Was there such a thing for you, Ralph, as a commissioning into your calling?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Well, at maybe 2 or 3 levels. The first one was we spoke with our pastor.
Okay.
At that time, we spoke. There was a very strong resistance at that level. But there were other pastors around who identified that and approved that. I remember very well one denomination, I will not mention the name here, even called us and prayed for us and gave us support.
Yeah.
Another denomination in the same town also gave us support and prayed for us.
Yeah.
And after our training, we also had a time of that presentation and commissioning and talking about where we'll be serving and what we are going to be doing. Yeah. So for me, those 3 levels, it really marked me because it gave me the courage and also the boldness, and I can even say the authority to say, okay, this is what God is calling me.
Yeah.
People have recognized it, and I can go with that confidence.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. We acknowledge the fact that your community of believers may or may not commission you officially like they did for Ralph, and there are implications for each of those courses. There are some people who end up being recognized as they go and things like that, and those are all things that we cannot get into in a video. We shall discuss that in our discussion groups for this week. But that is a little bit that we can share with you about the process of making the making of the person who has been called into a particular assignment from the Lord. We look forward to having more conversation with you as we discuss this in our discussion groups later tomorrow. Thank you.